Welcome. My name is Meira Blaustein. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Woodstock Film Festival, and also the person who kind of birthed, together with Megan Speary, the Youth Film Lab, which just finished its third year. And so very proud of all the students here, and so thankful to the teachers and to Megan Speary for her tremendous work as a program director, and her fabulous assistant, who you don't see on camera. But Zach, if you just want to pop in and say hello to our audience, that would be great, because yeah, Zach is the person behind the strings.
Zach, everybody.
And he did an amazing job. So I hope that many of our attendees had a chance to watch the films that all of you guys created. I want to explain something. The Youth Film Lab usually is an in-person at a venue lab that we always do for free for the students. And usually, when life is normal, the students work in small groups of 3 to 4 students each, together with an instructor and an instructor's assistant, and they create the group's film. This year, because of COVID, and because we took the lab online, we were lucky enough to be able to have each student create his or her individual short film. And some amazing works in a bunch. Very, very proud of everybody. So I want to first of all go to Megan. This is now her 3rd year that Megan is working as the program director, and she does an amazing job. Megan, can you talk a little bit about the difference between the first 2 years when we did it in person and this year when everything was done online?
Sure. So yeah, I feel like this was our miracle lab, and I'm very grateful for the fact that we had the opportunity to do it, but also we had the instructors that we did. All of the instructors that worked with us this year had done the lab in the past. So they had that as a foundation for what we do, right? And how to run the lab. And then the students that we had in the lab this year, a few of the students had done the lab before. So they had that foundation as well. But the difference for this year was that we were doing it totally online. We were providing the students with iPads to create their projects, and we were giving them daily modules that would, give them a foundation for whatever the subject was of the day, to look it over, share videos with them to give them inspiration. And then it was really up to them to want to create these projects. We gave them a little parameter of 4 themes, and asking them to create either a documentary or a narrative that spoke to one of the themes. And the 4 themes were Together and Apart, climate change, racism, and the best day ever. And so fast forward 3 weeks later, and we have 10 very unique projects, 2 documentaries and 8 narratives that all point to at least one of those themes. So we all adapted like everybody is in society, and we made it happen. So it's very exciting, and I'm totally grateful for everybody that was involved to be able to collaborate together but separately. So
great. Greg, you were instructor in the lab since year 1. This is your 3rd year that you've been doing it. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with the students, and just with general, again, as you had to adapt to this new format, and maybe weighing the pros and cons just a bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, first of all, the experience has always been wonderful. The experience when we were on site felt a little different, maybe more traditional, I think, in terms of what production expectations were. We had small group productions. We had people who were designated in specific roles: producer, director, editor, audio, and so forth. And we went out and we found talent together. We were on set together. We did grip work together. And it was a very much collaborative experience. And I think the benefits of that is that you are sharing your voice with other people and everybody's contributing in some way or another to a main project. This time around was a little bit different, of course. This time around, with it being mostly remote and with the learning being remote and with students being very much on their own, while they lost that group dynamic, they were able to pursue their visions as connected with one of the 4 prompts, and that they were able to really turn around, I think, some quality work, given so many of the variables against them. Even if the variables weren't there, you know, COVID and having to work on their own, I think that this work stands on its own. I think the work that they've created was not impacted negatively by the new reality we're in. Of course, as we know, a lot of work right now in the field, especially, for example, in broadcast television, is virtual. We're seeing Stephen Colbert, you know, on Zoom. We're seeing late night talk show hosts on Zoom. So having students learn for that reality and work toward, you know, in the reality that we're in right now is also very beneficial. So 2 very different, even though it's a year apart, 2 very different time frames that we were kind of working in, 2 very different social conditions that we were working in, but both valid and both resulted in some fine work being made.
Okay. I mean, I hope that our audience watch the films because they really are really great. And it's not an easy task to have done it during COVID on iPhones and iPads, basically sequestered at home. It's quite the achievement. So I want to ask Gina, before I go to the students, and don't worry, I'll get to each and every one of you. And I want to remind, by the way, our attendees, our audience, that you can also, if you have any questions for any of the students or the teachers, just go to the Q&A in the bottom of your screen and type in a question, and I will do my best to get to it. And also, in a few minutes, I'm going to bring on some of our mentors, and we will ask them some questions, and you will have a chance, audience, to ask our mentors questions as well. So Gina, your 2nd year with the lab, and I know it had its challenges, but I also know that you were very, very invested with your students' work, and they created some really incredible films. Do you want to talk a little bit about the relationship the working relationships that you were able to develop just via online communication, which is a whole different ballgame? You're muted.
Yeah, I feel like this workshop was really ahead of the curve. So just another thank you to Myra for making this happen, and for Megan for making this happen. Also to Zach. The whole community of Woodstock Film Festival is pretty incredible. And as universities are scrambling to figure out how they're going to do production next year and what that's going to look like, we just drove off a cliff. We just jumped in head first into this experience, and I think it was incredibly successful. I loved working with my students. I worked with Noah and with Asha. So if you've seen the link, you know their films, and it's really strange that it really felt like, I don't know, that we were all together somehow. We spent a lot of time on Zoom. So students and their instructors were checking in multiple times a day. Megan would run a check-in for the whole community in the morning, and then I would check in with my students to see, what would they be doing and producing in the morning hours. And then around 1 o'clock after lunch, we would resume in these Zoom's breakout rooms. And I had a chance to work one-on-one with Noah and with Asha. And it was a very, very gratifying experience to see students taking, shooting, directing, editing, music, everything into their own hands. And just like adult filmmakers, you know, working out of their homes and generating these projects and making them real. I mean, I was exhausted at the end of the days. It felt like we were together, and we spent time, and also Zoom allows you to mirror the screen. So I had an opportunity to, especially with Asha's project, drop into her work in Premiere. And it wasn't that far off from sitting in the editing room with a colleague. So, you know, I'm excited to go back to the physical world, but I think everything that we did was very tangible, very real, and was a huge success. And I think this program was really ahead of the curve. So I'm grateful to be a part of it. And I loved working with Noah and Asha. I think their films are excellent, and all the films are excellent. It's beautiful to see people's voices. I hope you guys enjoyed.
Indeed, they created each very different films, both very accomplished and interesting. David, for you, this was kind of you took a gap year.
Yeah.
You went over to the West Coast and studied there, and you were able to do it again, like, perhaps because it was online. I know you're back in the East Coast now. Can you talk a little bit about? Well, you have the perspective of doing it the first year, which was also our first foray into this whole realm, and then this year. And do you feel that you learned anything? To talk a little bit about your own experience with it, rather than.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that question, and I you know, I think we'll all have such distinct memories of this time in our lives, the summer of COVID. And I think this will be something that, you know, will rise towards the top of my experiences, because it was something very new for me to get to have a community, like Gina said, but online, and like you just pop in and we're all here. You know, it's not like one person comes in at a time. It's like all of a sudden we're together. And it really shows you that you can build community in all kinds of ways, all kinds of situations. So I think for me as an educator, it really gave me optimism in what we're all kind of launching into as students and teachers and parents and everybody, and doing a lot of distance learning and keeping those connections going. I think that, you know, I also really gained a lot of respect for each of the students because of the fact that, you know, they're not getting grades. They're doing this because they want to do it. They put in so much time this year. You know, when we were together, it was long, intense days. I mean, I know I got home and took a nap pretty much every time when we were together. But this time around, you know, they couldn't clock out at 3 and just kind of take a nap. They had to often shoot at the end of the day and edit into the night. And, you know, they did it because they have the passion. And so for me, it was inspiring. And I just want to all the, you know, students in the program, just say, I think it's a real credit to you and your abilities and your futures. And, you know, really a special experience for all of us to get to witness that. So, you know, for me, it was meaningful the first time around, but I think something really memorable, truly memorable this time.
Okay, I'm going to now, thank you. I'm going now to go to the students. And I have actually, there's a question from one of the attendees, and she's asking, and this is a question I'm going to toss out to the students, and whoever wants to answer that first, just raise your hand. Because I don't really know who to ask that of, but did you find it difficult to film only on iPhones and iPads? And I have to add to that not all of you have the comparison of shooting on film cameras or video cameras, but you all did have to make a film with iPhones and iPads, and it's not necessarily the most professional equipment. So if anybody here from the students want to take that answer, just to talk about your experience of the cinematography aspect of it. And if nobody raises their hand, I'm just going to put somebody on the spot. So, okay, Asha, go ahead.
I have used a real camera before, and last year, what a great part of the lab was that we actually got to use their equipment. So this year, using our phones, I mean, it was different. Nowadays, you know, smartphones have really good cameras, so that was nice. And it was almost easier to have them so portable and to put them anywhere. So it was different more than anything. I don't even think it wasn't a detriment to the experience. What was difficult was exporting it, 100% for me at least. Like just the technicality of it, it was not made to like take a lot of footage and things like that. But I think all in all, it was a new experience, and it does kind of feel like the future of filmmaking is on smartphones, and there have been feature films filmed on smartphones. So it was a good experience.
Indeed. Thank you. So I'm going to go to McTeer. McTeer, I watched you during the whole lab, and you were always very engaged with the mentors. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about your experience with the mentors and the mentorship in general, and how do you feel that contributed, if it did?
Well, thank you for asking me that question. For me, what was really good about the mentor visits in particular was it was a lot of people that I actually recognized. Like it was a lot of people whose films I had seen and I had admired. So, you know, obviously there's a little bit of that wow factor, because it's, wow, I'm meeting like, you know, Deborah Granick worked on Leave No Trace, which I love. Ron Neiswanger worked on Philadelphia, which I love. And, you know, so on and so forth. And even the people that I didn't really know about before, like off the top of my, I'm thinking off the top of my head right now, all of them were fantastic. But in particular, I didn't know who Joy and Noel were. I didn't know who Barbara Koppel was. And both of those presentations I thought were really fantastic, and I learned a lot from them. And then, and I know I've told this story 1,000 times, but meeting Kelsey Grammer was the coolest thing, because growing up with The Simpsons, you know, he's Sideshow Bob. That was just really
Frasier
cool.
and Cheers
Just really cool.
as adults.
Yeah.
But we'll go with the Simpson thing. Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah. But anyways, and they all had really expert advice, you know, all of them really, they were invested in us. They wanted to give us the best advice that they could. And, you know, that was really cool, because they gave a lot of really, for me, a couple of really invaluable pieces of advice, a lot of stuff that's going to stick with me, and a lot of stuff that I'm going to think of as I work in the future. And the one example I used in the interview last Friday on Radio Kingston was Ron Neiswanger, who I mentioned earlier, wrote Philadelphia. He said, and I think it's in the promotional material too, treat every story like it's a love story, so it has that sort of personal angle. And this is it was a more literal example of something that one of the mentors said, directly correlating to something that I did like later that week. Because at the time when I was trying to crack the script, I didn't really have that personal angle. The film had a premise, it had like a sort of, there was a plot that I was figuring out, but there wasn't that personal angle. There wasn't anything necessarily human about it yet. And I realized I need to treat this like a love story. I need to,
Right.
I need to, you know, figure out this sort of personal human angle to it. And once I have that, which I did find, and I'm happy with, you know, once I did that, once I found that, I think it came together faster. It was easier to write, and it was easier to shoot.
Actually, I'm going to mix things up a little bit. And since you talked about mentors and you mentioned Joy and Noel are attending this. And I wonder, Zach, if you can promote Joy and Noel and they can come and say hello. Joy and Noel are both animators, and here they are. Joy is joining, and Noel, I know, is going to join as well. And Joy, I mean, guys, if you can turn your cameras and audio on, we will see and hear you.
Hi.
Hello, Noelle. Hi, Joy.
It's like a picture from my wedding. It's just showing up. I'm sorry. Hi, everybody. It's so good to see your films. I enjoyed them so much. Really, I did.
They were
funny.
wonderful, you guys. I was like seriously blown away.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
professional. I can't believe that they were shot on iPhones. And you guys really all have something important to say. I'm sure it was cathartic and helpful for you going through such a crazy time in your young lives with COVID and everything that's going on in the world right now. To be able to like have this and it's sort of like a video diary or something in a way. It's like really cool to express yourselves, and I'm really impressed and I loved your work. Really did.
Yeah, same. I feel like, you know, Joy and I did most of the talking last time. You guys asked us great questions and you got to learn a little bit about us, but like seeing your films, I feel like I know each of you now. Like they were all so different and creative and I really can see like the passion that you guys have in your work. And we were texting each other while we were watching them in our own homes. And I was like, these do not even feel like student films. They're like definitely like a cut above. So like, yeah, again, like Joy said, I'm very impressed and like so proud that we were asked to mentor such talented filmmakers.
Thank you so much. I mean, we loved having you. And like what Maktir said, Maktir didn't know your work, but he learned so much from you, even though he didn't know your work beforehand. And I think that during the mentorship, you asked them if any of them would now want to work in animation. I think some of them, I mean, none of them have intended to work in animation, but I think that you may have changed some minds.
That's so cool to hear. I hope so. Even if it's a little bit of motion graphics, or I saw in one of the films, I think it was, and I quote, it had some really cool graphics. So that was really cool to see.
And isolation. I liked the motion graphics text that came up on the screen instead of seeing it on a phone, which is like, you know, like it was like another like creative way to do it. So like that totally counts as animation, you guys. Yeah. I did.
Oh yeah, and the Lost Trade had the interstitial illustrations. That was also really great to see.
Yeah.
Really helpful for moving the story along. I thought that was really interesting to learn about how whiskey barrels were made. I love whiskey, so that was really cool.
That's so great. Thank you. I'm actually, Megan, I'm going to completely change the order of my plan, and I'm going to bring another mentor who I believe is on. So Kate Sanford, who is the editor of Marvelous Mrs. Maisels. Zach, if she's there, can you promote her? And we will have another mentor. And hi, Kate.
Hey guys.
It's great to see you.
Hey, thanks. You guys are amazing. I watched all your films last night and then I watched them all again today. Incredible. I'm so impressed. And you guys all have such a specific, unique voice. Like, I agree with what Joy was just saying. Like, I feel like I know all of you. Also, you are your own protagonists sometimes. So like, I really know you and know your faces. And yeah, it's very impressive. I have a couple of questions for you guys. Actually. I don't know if this is the time, but
Go ahead.
I'm really curious. I mean, well, first of all, I think most of you were your own editors, right? Because I'm looking at the credits. Did anybody have a different editor that they work with, or everybody edited their own stuff? That's a hard thing to do, I've got to say. And I'm just curious, like, how did it go for you? So when you're cutting, right, you're your first audience. Like, you're telling yourself the story, and it's your rhythm, and you're telling yourself the story one shot after another, and it makes sense and it works for you. But then did you screen for each other? Like, was part of your lab that you would screen for each other? And then can anyone say like what their experience was when they screened in public, right? Did anything change for you having an audience? Yeah.
Go ahead, Starlo.
Well, when I screened for my audience, there was a lot of stuff that made a lot of sense to me because I'd seen it like a million times while I was editing it, but it didn't exactly make a lot of sense to the people I was screening it to. So I took their notes and I went back and I added more graphics and I made stuff more clear. And I think now I've come to a point where I'm really happy with the story and how much more understandable it is to someone who hasn't seen it a million times while they were editing it. So that really helped me.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And how did that feel? Was that hard to, like, you know, when I talked to you guys, I talked about like, I've been doing this for a long time, but even so, I'm nervous sometimes, you know, and getting feedback is another skill, right?
Yeah, it was tough to take feedback at first because it was like my baby, it was my film, but, you know, I took it and I, you know, interpreted it and just did what I thought would make it better, I guess. So to like a general audience. So.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, I thought it was spectacular. And also, well, I want to hear from anybody else. I just have one comment because I'm so excited to just get everything out that I'm thinking. I cannot believe how proficient you are, all of you are using music to tell your story. So you're cutting with, you know, with picture, with sound, and every single one of you is using music to tell your story as well. Like that is an entirely other narrative element. And I don't know, I just want to point that out. That's really impressive. And it's one of the hardest things to do, I think. It's still difficult to choose the right piece of music to instruct the audience what the tone is and how to tell your story. And you have very inventive ways of using music too. And a lot of you use it, you know, humorously and very specifically. The music will start and then it'll cut out to make a point, and it's very dynamic. So also super impressive.
Does any of the students want to address specifically the use of music in your films? Just tossing it to anybody here.
I would say Trudy because her film is about a musical instrument.
Okay, Trudy?
Sure. So my film just it's about like a ukulele who gets like basically thrown in the garbage, and so I decided to make it mostly like no dialogue, but to have music because of course you have music, it keeps the story moving and it's just really good to edit to and pace it to. And so I think that in a lot of instances it can be really hard to find the music you're looking for, but just in terms of like, you know, going through many different tracks, and because in my case obviously I'm not going to like, you know, make a whole new soundtrack because that would be a very in-depth process. So, you know, going through different like websites for music and finally finding the perfect track. I think it might take 3 or 4 tries just for one part, but when you finally find it, I think it's such a satisfying feeling because you kind of know and you're like, wow, this fits so perfectly and the pacing is so good. And I mean, I think music was such a critical part of my film because obviously I think it's kind of funny that, you know, it's the main character is also, you know, musical instrument, but and then it's accompanied by music. But I just think that it was a really crucial part, and I think it was one of the things that helped me feel like, okay, this is like more complete.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I'm gonna go to a couple of questions from our audience attendees. And there's a question posed here by Alan Berliner, who may be a documentary filmmaker that I know. And it's a long one, so bear with me. He's asking, how did the limitations of making films during the COVID crisis, no access to remote locations, no professional video cameras, restricted access to props and costumes, no auctions of, no auditions of actors, no access to actors in the community, etc., etc. How did it make you realize that those limitations could push you to discover new and sometimes even better ideas and solutions for your storytelling. Does anyone have an example of that, meaning that this extreme circumstances may have pushed you to create something different and perhaps better than you would have if everything was normal? Does anybody here from the group feel like this actually was a benefit in some way? I'm going to ask, let's see if nobody's answering. Noah, yes. Noel, I meant Noel. Go ahead, Noel.
So I was pushed because my movie is about it's a documentary about like Earth by aliens, and they completely misunderstand everything, and they think that our dog is like, no, am I frozen?
You were. I think is Noel frozen? I think he is. Okay.
Yeah.
No, we'll get back to you later, okay? Does anybody else want to take that? I wonder if, let's see, Isabel, is it something that you would like to address?
Sure. It was rough at first, just because, you know, I was used to having access to, you know, actors. I don't normally act. I hate it personally. So in my head, I'm like, I don't want to act. I can't, like, you know, do that type of job. So that was a problem at first, but I ended up just getting over it just a little bit. I actually made my own props, which took a little bit of time, but I managed to do that. And I mean, luckily I had my own camera and I had my setting here. So it wasn't that hard, but like, I feel like obviously it's a different type of setting to work in.
Right. Noah, how was the experience for you? And you don't have to necessarily compare it to what it would have been like had you had such and such, but just talk a little bit about having to work the way you did.
I mean, for me, it definitely just pushed me to set this story during COVID, because then it's easy. It's like, why is it in a house? Well, there's a pandemic, you know? So it made it make more sense that it's really only me and my family and then like one of my friends that you see in the film. Because I mean, it also is about a guy who's like bored in his house, and that definitely works. I mean, I've been bored in my house a lot during this pandemic, so yeah.
Right. Megan, is there something that you would like to ask any of the students?
Are you guys happy that you've had a few days off? Because seriously, I mean, they were all serving as their own directors and screenwriters and producers, and some of them were acting, and, you know, then they were looking for music, and they were making props, and they were editing, and they were, you know, setting up their production schedules. So, you know, David had mentioned before, you know, last year and the previous year, we would, you know, all clock out at 3 o'clock and like go on with our lives. And this year, because we were doing things online and they were serving as like, you know, one person crews, and they were really involved in all aspects, they were working. I mean, I was getting emails at 9, 10, 12 o'clock at night, you know, and so I knew that they were working, Mechtier. And so they were working a good, you know, 12-hour days at least. And so we had kind of softly suggested to them that if you're working in the industry, it's not a 9 to 5, you know, you have a 12-hour day. And so I think for the most part, a majority of them experience that. So now that you guys have had a little time off, how do you feel?
Anybody?
Mactier.
Jackson,
Or
let's get somebody else. Jackson, how
Jackson.
are you?
I feel a lot more relieved because when
You have an echo.
when we were working, I had no breaks and I was just working nonstop, like hours a day, and I got like barely any sleep at night, and just having a break is just feels so much better.
Hmm.
Last couple days.
You remember when Kate was telling you how long it takes? Sometimes she works as an editor. Kate, you wanna remember when you were telling us about? Tell us about how long do you usually work when you're in the midst of editing?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, it can be, you know, when I'm with a director, for example, it can be 10 hours straight with that person in the room. And then when I'm working on my own and trying to get ready for that cut, I mean, it can be 12 hours a day. It's sort of as many hours as I can do, you know, sometimes to make a deadline. And it's hard, depends on the kind of project you're working on. But I mean, if you are the kind of person that's devoted to this and dedicated, it's also an obsession, right? So it's actually hard to put it down. So I try to be disciplined about it, but as you guys probably experienced, you get caught up and you get a little bit obsessive, and sometimes you even get in a zone and it's midnight and you don't want to stop. And so it sounds like that's some of what happened to you all. And then it's good to take breaks. And I work on TV, so it can be episodic. I can actually have a little break or a little downtime and then get back into the rhythm of it, and then another episode comes along and piles of footage, and I've got to keep up with all the footage. It's hard.
Joy and Noel, when you guys work on an animation project that you have been contracted to do, what's your rhythm? How many hours a day? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I totally relate to what you were saying, Kate. Sometimes you are in a zone, like I'm currently in a zone on a project, and I feel like there aren't enough hours in the day to work on it. But I try to be on like a normal person's schedule. So if I had a real job, maybe I would start at 10. So sometimes I don't let myself work until 10 o'clock, and I'll say the morning is for meditation, the morning is for coffee in the yard with my dogs, and then after I have some special self-care time, I can get to work. And I try to not eat at my desk at lunchtime, and because that can be sad. And take a break and get back to it with fresh eyes. And I try to, if we have a deadline, I'll stop for dinner, watch a little TV. If we have a deadline, it does sometimes get pretty late, but Joy and I will usually text each other and say, maybe we'll just get up really, really early instead of staying up really, really late.
Or sometimes we're like, night shift, and we order food and we just go, 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 don't sleep. And then you're just on a nap schedule every couple of hours until you're passing out at your desk. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to sleep for an hour or two. And sometimes that's really bad. And that's when a project is really intense. But usually I like to work the normal hours that everybody works. And I like to feel like I'm a part of society. And it's really good. I like to keep a calendar of all the little tasks that I should get done that day and check them off, and it feels good to do that check mark. But yeah, it gets really intense at the end and you're pulling all-nighters and it's crazy. And then for some reason I still keep doing it. I love it.
It's addicting.
Yeah.
I have another question from the audience, and I think I'm going to toss that to Django. The question is, what was it like working in such a compressed time frame? And Django, I know that this is the first film that you worked on, and you worked on it in not very easy conditions, and you had those 3 weeks you had to from start to finish. How was it for you? How did you deal with that?
During the 3 weeks, I felt that the first the first two, they were fairly like scheduled enough for me to have time to relax and everything was simple. But when the editing week came along, I felt that the amount of work and the time that I could stay awake wasn't coexisting really well together. So I felt that everyone made a wonderful schedule, and I think the editing was the hardest part during that last week. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else wants to answer, to address that? Thomas, go ahead.
Yes, time frame. I'm an expert in this category, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because while this is the first film I've made with an attempt to be slightly professional, I have made short films before with my friends, and specifically with my cousin. He does not live in town, so he comes in for like 3 days at a time, and that's when I see him. So we have like 3 days to shoot, edit, just like create an entire like 30-minute short film that we do together. So I've kind of figured out a lot of loopholes for filming in a very short period of time and getting the content that I want. So it's kind of a weird different thing that I have going on. So yeah, I'm pretty used to it.
Okay, good. Well, I have another question here, and it is, what is something that you can take from the film that you made this year that you will use, drumroll, in the next film you make? So for that, you of course have to be wanting to make another film, for one thing. I can ask maybe Starla, is that something that you want to talk about?
Sure. Making this film was awesome. I loved it. I loved every stressful second of it. And first of all, I learned how to do graphics, which was just a thing that I had no idea how to do. And I figured it out, and they looked pretty good, I think. And I'm really proud of that. So I'm, going to be using that, whenever I can. I also learned a lot about music. I spent like so long just going through music bit by bit and figuring out, is it good? Is it too cheesy? Is it not cheesy enough? And I really learned a lot, especially in the editing, because I've never really been an editor, and suddenly I had to be an editor. And I really focused on cuts that like look smooth and transition-y, and the white balance is bad on this one, but the exposure is bad on that one. And it was a whole big experience. And then even before that, I had to really direct a crew. I wasn't starring in it, which is abnormal for me. I usually, when I make films, I star in them, but I didn't do that this time. And so I had to really direct my actors and just have them do exactly what I want to do without making them mad, because they were also my friends and also doing this for free, and we weren't even catering. So we had to do that. I had to figure out how to direct them in a way to get them to do what I wanted to do without, being mean or stressing them out or making them, mad or whatever. And not to mention, we were filming on like 90-degree days, and half of my actors were wearing jackets. It was not fun for them, but it was fun for me in the end, because I made, I think, a pretty awesome film. And I learned so much that I'm going to be taking away, and especially about just like making a film that I wanted to make, and just that whole experience. I don't know, it was amazing, and I'm definitely going to be carrying that, into my future filmmaking prospects.
Thank you. I can't wait to see your next film. So I have an interesting question here, just different from the others. And the person is asking, I was really surprised with how quickly the students had to decide on the themes, subject, and it's really on the subjects for their films. Do any of the students, and let's choose somebody who hasn't spoken as much, do any of the students want to talk about how they decided on their theme, and whether it was difficult coming up with this in just a day or two? And I would expand on that question and also ask if the storyline or the theme or the subject that you have chosen originally for your film, has that changed during development and production? So I I wonder if, Asha, I think that this is something that, even though Asha made a documentary, I think that this is something that perhaps you could address. Would you like to, Asha?
Yeah, sure. I think when I was choosing my genre, I don't know, I wrote down a whole list of ideas in my notebook, and I looked at all of the themes and had different ideas for each theme. And I ended up choosing the theme racism because it felt really relevant to what was happening in my life and my community. And it was hard to come up with it so quick, and I didn't feel solid on the idea at the time. And as I had a very different idea at first than what it developed to be. And that's kind of what happens when you have such a short period of time to come up with a solid idea. So it wasn't really a solid idea. It developed as I filmed, which I think is a completely positive thing. I also think it happens a lot with documentary filmmaking. Yeah.
Anybody else? I mean, I totally agree with you, by the way. I mean, that's one of the wonderful things about documentary filmmaking is they do evolve as you get deeper and deeper into the making of it. And it's really great to be able to let that breathe and take a life of its own. Anybody else who has done a narrative who wants to address the screenwriting and development of that aspect? Isabel, is that something that you want to touch upon?
Yeah, I could. At first, I really struggled coming up with an idea based on the themes. It like took me another day and a half to figure it out, but mine stayed pretty consistent once I figured it out, that I wanted to, make this kind of like scary type of situation in quarantine.
Right. Anybody else who wants to talk about coming up with a storyline for their film or not? I wonder if, I want to go back to our mentors and wonder if you can give some sort of advice now that you've seen their films and also have gotten to know them a little bit, hearing them talk here. Is there anything that you could impart upon them, something that would help them perhaps if and when they go on to make more films? Kate, I'm going to put you on the spot with that just because as an editor, you have a specific vantage point that may be able to be helpful here.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, everybody had such a strong point of view and such a particular voice. And that's what I was so impressed with. Everyone's such a specific, unique individual. I guess I'm going to go back to as you quoted Ron Neiswaner saying like every film is a love story or should be a love story. And I want to expand on that and say every film has to be emotional in some way. And so the advice I would give is not to hold back on the emotion. So if you're trying to communicate something, let it be written on the face, and don't be afraid to linger sometimes on that. And the only thing that I wanted occasionally in some of your films is even more, right? Sometimes I just wanted to see even more face and more of a moment or a feeling or something like that. I feel like it was all there. And then sometimes I was like, oh, I want to get in deeper. But of course, they're short films and you guys have a short time and you did an amazing job. So I'm not here to be critical or anything. I'm here to just say I enjoyed them all and really, really appreciated everyone's point of view. And yeah, when I talk to students, I say, don't hold back on the emotion. Like, it won't be corny. It'll be heartfelt. It'll be true. And it'll just reinforce what you want to say. And so go further into emotion, go as far as you can go into emotion. And then if it's too much, pull back on it. So that's how I approach it, is to put everything into it. And if it's too much, and then of course, screen for people, see how they feel. When you bring somebody even into the room, maybe I said this to you guys before, but even if there isn't a word said, you'll understand more about how your audience is reading your film just by having them there. And so sometimes you go, no, half a step too far and then pull back on it. So I would just say, you know, keep going and give it your all and dive deep. That's, anyway, again, really, really impressive.
And thank you. And Joy and Noel, you are creators. You create animation shorts or series. And I wonder if you could give the students input and advice as coming from the creator point of view. You are animators, but you're first and most creators, because you're creating the story, you're creating everything there. Is there anything that you could impart upon them from that place of creating? Either one of you.
Oh, sure.
I always forget that I'm muted.
I was just gonna say again how brilliant I think you all are. I am floored by you're all so intelligent and eloquent, and the way you speak about this. It's like how I feel when I make something. So it's so cool to hear your perspective about filmmaking, and just keep going. You know, like they always say in animation to draw every day. Like my teacher, Patrick Smith, said thousands of drawings aren't going to draw themselves. So like you just have to keep drawing. And if you want to keep doing this type of filmmaking, write every day. Like keep a record of like things that you hear that you think are funny, things that you see, little ideas that you get. Like Noelle and I always say that this type of stuff like we keep in the morgue. So it's in the morgue, and like if we are like, well, didn't we want to make something, and then we like go to the morgue and we look about like what our next project might be. So yeah, like just keeping like a little library for yourselves, even, you know, because like making a film is time consuming. So like just having that little collection of ideas ongoing constantly, like a notebook even, or like however you like to keep files, something like that might be helpful. But you guys, you know what you're doing. You're all really, really talented. And yeah, like keep going with the genre that you like, or the, you know, like try different ones. Like when we were in school, I think we were making totally different work than the type of work that we're making now. So it's like really fun to see how like you evolve over time and things like that. But Noelle, do you have anything else to say? I feel like I'm rambling a little bit.
Yeah, no, you're not. I agree. I think that's really great advice, Joy, and I'm going to take that for the next time I make a short film. I would say, and a lot of you did this, like, and I noticed that like in such a short film, like I could tell that you were giving these characters backstories, like with very little information. Like I felt like there was some history there, and like I knew who they were, and keep doing that. Like figure out what your, like for future work, like what your character wants and what other characters want from them, and how you can make those characters butt up against each other will just give you like more interesting character dynamics, and makes the audience care even more. And like I said, you guys were already successful doing that, so just keep going. Like I look forward to seeing more of your work.
Me too. Parting words, Megan.
I mean, I want to say during last week when they were in post and they were editing, I constantly was saying, remember what Kate said, remember what Kate said, remember Kate was here, remember what Kate said. So that was, your ears must have been ringing all last week, Kate. But another thing that two mantras I think I've imparted on them over and over again is, one, teamwork makes the dream work, and two, keep it simple. We really tried to give them parameters that were going to help them to focus, especially because we knew that they were going to be making these films as individuals in the midst of a pandemic, using the resources they had at their disposal, which were iPhones and iPads. And so, they're all amazingly creative people, and they wanted to do these very ambitious things. And we just kept saying, keep it simple, keep it simple, keep it simple, like boil it down to the most simple form of what it is that you want to do and start there. And I know that there's a couple of films that were made this session. I know Asha's film is probably going to turn into something a much like larger piece because she's really dedicated to that story. And there's probably a couple of other films that were made that are, you know, basically like pilots for whatever they want to do or to jump from. So it's okay to make something that seems like it's too simple because you can always expand upon that. So hopefully that's something that they'll take with them as they go out into the world.
Yes. And I just want to reiterate something that Barbara Koppel said when she spoke to you, and she spoke a lot about community. And even though you guys were not in person with everybody else, you were very, very close with each other through Zoom. And I really hope that you'll keep this community going for yourselves, because in a lot of worlds, but especially in the film worlds, your peers, your colleagues, really important as you journey through this life. And they can be very helpful to you and vice versa. So stay in touch with everybody. And if anybody else, any from the students want to say something, like maybe thank you or whatever you want to say, that now is the time. Now is the time to say so. Whatever you want to say. Oh, I didn't like this program, Meira.
Don't say that.
Looks like Django has his hand up.
Django, go ahead.
Noelle and Joy, I just wanted to say you were definitely my favorite mentor out of all of them. I find animation fascinating, and seeing the behind the scenes and how you two work was just amazing. So thank you.
Joy,
thank you for saying that. That's really, really nice to hear. Thank you for the kind words.
I'm glad that it was helpful because, you know, none of you like were taking an animation course this summer. So I'm glad that like our advice about filmmaking was relevant to live action filmmakers. And I'm glad that our process was interesting. Thank you.
And just so you know, Joy and Noelle program the animation program at the festival, and they'll do that. I mean, they're doing that this year. So if you want to see them again, if you want to see the other kind of thing that they do, which is curate, come to the festival and see that.
Yeah, so, please do. I'm really excited about the program this year. Some great films.
Okay, I can't wait. And so, unless there's anybody else wants to say something, go ahead, Trudy. Oh, Maktir and Jackson. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you not only to the mentors, but also, you know, the program leaders and our advisors. I just had a lot of fun this year, even like among the COVID-19 circumstances. And, you know, I'm glad that we were able to have, you know, such great mentors and advisors. And it was just such a well thought out program. And just thank you to everybody.
Thank you for taking part. Maktir?
Trudy sort of hit the nail on the head. So, but just personally, thank you so much to the mentors, all three of you, for your awesome advice, to the instructors for all of your help, and Mayra and Megan, thank you for this opportunity. It's been a great experience for me, both years that I've done it. Just from the bottom of my heart, the deepest gratitude. Thank you.
Good luck in your as you go to college, and I hope to see films out of you in the future. Jackson?
I just want to say thank you. It was an incredible experience, just basically what Trudy and Maktir said. I really loved it, and I had a lot of fun doing this, and just thank you.
Well, you're all very, very welcome. And Starla, okay, hi.
Sorry, I also really wanted to say thank you to everyone. This was truly amazing, and I'm really happy with just how everything turned out, and just thank you everyone so much for your guidance and inspiration and stuff.
Well, thank you all for being a part of the program. Thank you to the students, to the instructors, to the program director, to her assistant, to the mentors, to the anonymous donors who made it all possible. And have a great rest of the summer, everybody. Come to the Woodstock Film Festival, and do me a favor and stay in touch with each other and with us. We want to see more work out of you. So thank you very much for doing this. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.